What if you made a decision in anger that changed everything? Robert Mitchell stood in his corner office, staring down at the little diner across the street where he just humiliated a young woman in front of everyone. His hands were still shaking, not from rage anymore, but from something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like shame. He'd been eating breakfast at Rosie's Diner for 15 years, ever since he started his tech company in this neighborhood. He knew every face, every regular, every waitress by name. But this morning, when Sarah limped in 20 minutes late for the third time this week, something inside him snapped. He'd stood up, called her over to his table, and in front of the entire morning crowd, told her she was finished. The look on her face, that mixture of pain and resignation, it wouldn't leave him. Now, watching from his window as she struggled down the sidewalk, he noticed something he'd been too angry to see before. She wasn't just walking slowly. She was barely walking at all. Where are you watching from today? The morning had started like any other Tuesday for Robert Mitchell. At 62, he'd built Mitchell Technologies from a two-person startup in a garage to a company employing over 300 people. He was proud of that, proud of the way he'd treated people fairly, paid well, and never forgotten where he came from. His father had been a construction worker, his mother a school secretary. They'd taught him the value of hard work and showing up on time. Those values had carried him through 40 years in business. Through the dot-com crash, through recessions, through everything. Rosie's Diner sat directly across from his office building. A little rectangle of chrome and red vinyl that had somehow survived while everything else in the neighborhood transformed into glass towers and expensive coffee shops. Robert ate there every morning because the food reminded him of his mother's cooking, and because Rosie herself, now in her 70s, still came in 3 days a week to supervise. The waitresses knew his order by heart. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, coffee black, and a side of fruit instead of hash browns because his doctor had been nagging him about his cholesterol. Sarah Brennan had started working at the diner about 8 months ago. She was younger than most of the other waitresses, maybe 35. With light brown hair she wore in a practical ponytail and a smile that seemed genuine even during the breakfast rush. She was good at her job, quick and efficient, never forgot an order. Robert had noticed her immediately because she reminded him a little of his daughter Melissa, who lived in Seattle now with her own family. Same quick laugh, same way of tilting her head when she listened to people talk. But lately, Sarah had been late. Not just a few minutes here and there, everyone ran late sometimes. Real late, 15-20 minutes. And when she arrived, she moved differently, slower, more careful. Robert had noticed it over the past 2 weeks, but he'd been dealing with a major contract negotiation at work, and his attention had been scattered. This morning, though, when he'd been sitting at his usual booth and watched, Sarah pushed through the diner door 23 minutes past her shift start time. Something in him had simply broken. He'd been having a terrible week. The contract negotiations had fallen apart. His ex-wife had called to complain about something involving their grandson's school tuition, implying Robert wasn't doing enough financially, which was absurd given everything he already contributed. His blood pressure medication wasn't working right, and he barely slept. When Sarah walked in, moving with that strange, careful gait, he'd felt his frustration find a target. "Sarah," he'd called out, loud enough that conversation stopped. "Come here, please." She'd walked over to his booth, and up close, he could see how pale she was. There were dark circles under her eyes. But he'd been too angry to care. "You're late again," he'd said. "3rd time this week. 4th if we count last Thursday." "Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry." "I can explain." "I don't want to hear it," he'd interrupted, his voice carrying across the diner. "I own a business too. You know what happens to people who show up late at my company? They don't work there anymore. Rosie's been too soft on you." Someone needs to teach you that actions have consequences. He'd looked past her to where Rosie was standing behind the counter, her face unreadable. Rosie, if you won't fire her, I will. I've been a customer here for 15 years. I spend a lot of money in this place, and I'm telling you, I'm not coming back until she's gone. The silence in the diner had been absolute. Sarah's face had gone from pale to completely white. She'd opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded once. It's okay, Rosie, she'd said quietly. I understand. Thank you for the chance you gave me. Then she'd untied her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the counter. When she walked toward the door, Robert noticed how she steadied herself against the counter, then the back of a chair, then the door frame. But he told himself she was being dramatic, trying to make him feel guilty. Now, an hour later, watching from his office window as Sarah made her way down the sidewalk across the street, Robert felt that certainty crumbling. She wasn't being dramatic. Something was genuinely wrong with her. She'd stop every few feet, rest her hand against a building or a parking meter. At one point, she nearly fell, catching herself against a mailbox. An older woman walking a small dog stopped to ask if she was okay, and Sarah waved her off with what even from this distance looked like a forced smile. Robert turned away from the window and sat down at his desk. He had work to do, contracts to review, emails to answer. But Sarah's face wouldn't leave his mind. That look she'd given him before she left, not angry, not even hurt, just tired. So incredibly tired. By lunchtime, Robert couldn't concentrate on anything. He'd read the same contract paragraph 4 times without absorbing a single word. His assistant, Patricia, had brought him his usual sandwich from the deli, but it sat untouched on his desk. Finally, he picked up his phone and called Rosie's Diner. After 3 rings, Rosie herself answered. Rosie's. What can I do for you? Rosie, it's Robert Mitchell. There was a pause. I figured you'd be calling. Look, Robert stopped. What was he calling to say? I wanted to apologize for this morning. I was out of line, making demands about your employee like that. You were, Rosie agreed, her voice neutral. But you're a good customer, Robert. You've been coming here since before I bought this place from my uncle. I know you're not usually like that. I've been having a rough week, Robert said, then immediately felt ashamed. That wasn't an excuse. That doesn't make it okay. I shouldn't have taken it out on Sarah. Is she? Does she have another job lined up? Another pause. Then Rosie said carefully, Robert, did you notice anything different about Sarah these past couple weeks? She was late, Robert said. That's what I noticed. Nothing else? Robert thought about the way Sarah had moved through the diner, holding on to things. She was walking funny, slow, but I assumed. He stopped. What had he assumed? Rosie, what's going on? I don't feel right talking about Sarah's business without her permission, Rosie said. But I will tell you this. That girl has been through hell, and she's been showing up to work anyway because she needs this job. She's been late because getting here at all is nearly impossible for her right now. And you just cost her the one income she had. Robert felt something cold settle in his stomach. What do you mean she's been through hell? Like I said, that's her story to tell. But if you really want to make this right, maybe you should ask her yourself. She lives over on Maple Street, the old brick apartments above the laundromat. Number 2C. Rosie's voice softened slightly. She's a good girl, Robert. She didn't deserve what happened this morning. After Rosie hung up, Robert sat at his desk for a long time. He didn't have to do anything. He could just leave it alone, let it blow over. Sarah would find another job. Life would go on. But his conscience, which his mother had instilled in him with the same firmness she'd used to teach him to say please and thank you, wouldn't let him rest. He'd humiliated that young woman in public. The least he could do was apologize in private. At 4 o'clock, Robert left the office early for the first time in months. He drove to Maple Street and found the brick apartment building Rosie had mentioned. It was old but well-maintained, with window boxes where someone had planted yellow chrysanthemums. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, found apartment 2C, and knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he heard slow, careful footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, and Sarah peered out. When she saw who it was, her expression shifted from cautious to wary. Mr. Mitchell. "Hello, Sarah. I wondered if I could talk to you for a few minutes." She didn't move to open the door wider. "About what?" "About this morning. I owe you an apology." Sarah studied his face for a moment, then stepped back and opened the door. "Come in, I guess." The apartment was small but clean, with sunlight streaming through the windows. Robert noticed immediately the walker folded up by the coat rack. His eyes went to it, then back to Sarah, who was lowering herself carefully onto the couch. She saw him looking at the walker. "I don't always need it," she said quietly. "Some days are better than others. This morning was a bad morning." Robert remained standing, suddenly unsure of what to say. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I was completely out of line at the diner. The way I spoke to you, the things I said, none of that was acceptable." "You were right, though," Sarah said, and there was no bitterness in her voice, just exhaustion. "I was late. I have been late. That's not professional. Will you tell me why?" Robert asked gently. "Rosie said you've been going through something difficult." Sarah looked down at her hands. For a moment, Robert thought she might refuse. Then she began to speak. "2 months ago, I was in a car accident. Someone ran a red light and hit my driver's side door. I had 3 surgeries on my left leg and hip. The doctors say I'm lucky I can walk at all." She paused, and Robert could hear the tremor in her voice. "The other driver didn't have insurance. Mine is covering the medical bills, but barely. I've been in physical therapy 4 times a week. The sessions are early morning, which is why I've been late. I've been trying to do both, make it to therapy and then get to work, because I need the job to keep my insurance. I should have explained this to Rosie from the start, but I was afraid she'd let me go if she knew how bad it was." Robert felt as though someone had punched him in the chest. "Oh, Sarah." "The worst part," Sarah continued, and now her voice did break, "is that some days I wake up and I can barely move. The pain is so bad I can't think straight. But I get up anyway because I have to. I don't have family here. I don't have anyone to help. So I push through it, and I get to work, and I do my job the best I can." She looked up at him, and Robert saw tears in her eyes. "I know I should have been honest from the beginning. But I was scared, Mr. Mitchell. I'm still scared. If this moment touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up." Robert sat down heavily in the chair across from her, his mind reeling. This brave young woman had been fighting through incredible pain and hardship, and he'd publicly humiliated her for it. He'd never felt so ashamed in his entire life. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough, "I can't tell you how sorry I am." She wiped at her eyes. "It's done now. I'll find something else." "No," Robert said firmly. Something was crystallizing in his mind, a way to make this right. "No, that's not how this is going to end." He stood up, pulled out his phone, and made a call. When Rosie answered, he said, "Rosie, it's Robert. Sarah has her job back if she wants it, and I'm covering her salary personally for the next 3 months while she heals. I don't care if she's late. I don't care if she needs to sit down between orders. You make whatever accommodation she needs." He paused. "And I'm going to do more than that." After Robert left her apartment that evening, Sarah sat on her couch for a long time, not quite believing what had just happened. He'd insisted she take her job back at the diner, promised to cover her salary and said something about helping with her medical expenses too. It felt surreal, like a dream she might wake up from. People didn't just fix things like this. In Sarah's experience, when life knocked you down, you stayed down unless you could claw your way back up by yourself. She'd been doing exactly that for 2 months now. After the accident, after the surgeries, after the parade of doctors and physical therapists and insurance adjusters who all looked at her with varying degrees of sympathy and bureaucratic indifference, Sarah had made herself a promise. She would survive this. She would get better. She would not become a victim. But the reality of recovery had been so much harder than she'd anticipated. The pain was constant, a dull ache that sharpened into knife stabs whenever she moved wrong. The physical therapy helped, but it also hurt terribly. Some mornings she'd wake up and just lie there, crying quietly, trying to convince herself to get out of bed. The financial stress was almost worse than the physical pain. Her job at Rosie's didn't pay much, but it was enough to cover her rent and groceries and keep her insurance active. Losing it this morning had felt like the final blow, the thing that would finally break her. She'd walked home in a daze, each step sending fresh waves of pain up her leg. And when she'd finally made it into her apartment, she'd collapsed on the floor and sobbed. Not gentle tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from a place of complete despair. That was where she'd been when Robert Mitchell knocked on her door. She dragged herself up, wiped her face, and answered, expecting, what? More accusations? Anger? Instead, he'd apologized. More than that, he'd listened. Really listened. When she'd told him about the accident, about the surgeries, about the fear and the pain and the impossible choice between healing and surviving financially, she'd seen something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Now, hours later, her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but Sarah answered anyway. Hello? Sarah Brennan? This is Dr. Chun's office calling. We're Robert Mitchell's physician. Mr. Mitchell has asked us to reach out to you regarding your recovery from your car accident. He's requested that we coordinate with your current medical team and provide any additional care you might need. He's covered all costs. Sarah's breath caught. I'm sorry, what? The receptionist repeated the information patiently. Mr. Mitchell has arranged for us to support your continued recovery. We'd like to schedule an appointment for you to meet with Dr. Chun and our physical therapy team. We specialize in accident recovery and post-surgical rehabilitation. Would tomorrow at 10 work for you? Yes. Yes, that would work. Sarah's hands were shaking. Thank you. After she hung up, she sat staring at her phone. Why was Robert Mitchell doing this? She was nobody to him, just a waitress who'd served him eggs and coffee. This kind of generosity didn't make sense. Part of her wanted to refuse it, to maintain her independence, to prove she could handle everything on her own. But a larger, more honest part of her knew she couldn't. She was drowning, and he'd thrown her a lifeline. Only a fool would refuse to grab it. The next morning, Sarah woke up to her alarm and, for the first time in weeks, didn't immediately want to cry. The pain was still there. It would be there for a long time. The doctors had told her, but the crushing weight of despair had lifted slightly. She had hope again. She got ready slowly, carefully, and took a taxi to Dr. Chun's office using money Robert had apparently arranged for transportation. Dr. Chun was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands. She examined Sarah's leg, reviewed her surgical records, and nodded thoughtfully. You've had good care so far, she said, but I think we can do better. I'm going to recommend a more intensive physical therapy program, 3 times a week instead of 4, but with specialized equipment that should speed your recovery and reduce your pain. We'll also look at pain management options that don't rely so heavily on medication. How much will? Sarah started to ask. It's covered, Dr. Chun said firmly. Mr. Mitchell has been very clear about that. Your only job is to focus on getting better. Sarah felt tears starting again, but this time they were different. Not despair, but gratitude. I don't understand why he's doing this. Dr. Chun smiled. I've known Robert Mitchell for 15 years. He's a good man who made a mistake, and he's the kind of person who does whatever it takes to make things right. Let him help you, Sarah, and someday, when you're better, you can pay it forward to someone else. Have you ever faced something like this where a stranger's kindness changed everything? Let us know in the comments below. That afternoon, Sarah returned to Rosie's diner. Rosie took one look at her and pulled her into a hug. I'm glad you're back, sweetheart. We missed you. The other waitresses welcomed her warmly, and even the regular customers seemed happy to see her. Robert Mitchell wasn't there apparently. He ate lunch in his office most days, but Sarah felt his presence anyway and the kindness surrounding her. The next few weeks transformed Sarah's life. The new physical therapy program was challenging but effective. The specialized exercises and equipment Dr. Chun's team used made a real difference. The pain began to recede, slowly but noticeably. Sarah could walk a little easier each day, needed the walker less often, could get out of bed without wanting to cry. Just as importantly, the financial pressure had lifted. She could focus on healing without constantly calculating how many hours she needed to work to keep her insurance active, but the biggest change was internal. Sarah had spent so long feeling alone, feeling like she had to handle everything by herself because there was no one else. Robert Mitchell's intervention had shown her something she'd forgotten. Sometimes people helped. Sometimes kindness existed. Sometimes you could let yourself be vulnerable and accept support, without it making you weak. 6 weeks after that terrible morning at the diner, Sarah walked into Rosie's for her shift without any assistance. No walker, no cane, just her own 2 legs carrying her forward with only the slightest limp. Rosie noticed immediately and let out a whoop of joy that made the whole diner turn to look. Look at you, Rosie exclaimed, coming around the counter to embrace Sarah. Look at you walking. Sarah grinned, feeling tears prick her eyes again, but good tears this time. Dr. Chun says I'm ahead of schedule. I might not ever be 100%, but I'm getting close. That's wonderful, honey. Just wonderful. It was a Tuesday morning, which meant Robert Mitchell would be in for breakfast. Sarah had seen him several times over the past weeks, but their interactions had been brief and slightly awkward. He seemed almost shy around her now, as if he wasn't sure how to act. Sarah understood the feeling. Their relationship had been redefined by that awful morning and everything that came after. And neither of them quite knew what it was supposed to be now. When Robert came in at 7:30, Sarah walked over to his booth without hesitation. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. The usual? He looked up, and his face broke into a genuine smile when he saw her walking normally. Sarah, you look wonderful. I feel wonderful, she said honestly. Thanks to you. Thanks to you, Robert corrected gently. You did the work. You showed up to every therapy session. You pushed through the pain. I just helped clear some obstacles out of your way. Sarah set her order pad down and slid into the booth across from him, something she never would have dared to do before. Mr. Mitchell, I need to say something, and then I promise I'll let you eat your breakfast in peace. Please, call me Robert. Robert, then. She took a breath. What you did for me, what you're still doing, it saved my life. I'm not being dramatic. I was drowning, and I didn't see any way out. I was about to lose everything. You pulled me back from that edge. I don't know how to repay that kind of kindness. Robert's expression grew serious. Sarah, you don't owe me anything. If anything, I owe you. I'm ashamed of how I treated you that morning. I've thought about it every day since. I pride myself on being a good man, on treating people well, and I failed completely." "You didn't deserve that." "Maybe we both got something out of this," Sarah suggested. "You learned something about yourself, and I learned that it's okay to accept help." "That seems fair." Robert laughed, and some of the tension between them dissolved. "You're wise beyond your years, you know that?" "I'm 36, Sarah said with a grin. "I'm not that young." They talked for a few more minutes, and for the first time, it felt natural, easy, like two people who'd been through something difficult together and come out the other side as friends. When Sarah finally stood up to take his order, Robert said, "Sarah, wait. I wanted to ask you something." "Sure. My company, Mitchell Technologies, is looking for someone to run our employee wellness program. It's a new initiative we're starting helping employees manage stress, coordinating with health insurance, creating a supportive work environment. The salary is good, the benefits are excellent, and it's a 9-to-5 job, no more early morning shifts." He paused. "I think you'd be perfect for it. You understand what people go through when they're struggling. You have empathy and strength. Would you be interested?" Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. You don't have to answer now. Think about it." "But I meant what I said. You'd be perfect for this role." The offer was tempting. More than tempting. It was the kind of opportunity Sarah had dreamed about, but never thought she'd actually get. But something made her hesitate. "Robert, I need to know this isn't charity. I don't want a job because you feel guilty." "It's not charity," Robert said firmly. "I wouldn't offer you a position at my company if I didn't think you'd excel at it. Yes, I want to help you. But I also genuinely believe you're the right person for this job. Ask anyone who works at Mitchell Technologies. I don't hire people out of pity. I hire people who can do the work and do it well." Sarah felt a smile spreading across her face. "Then yes, I'd love to interview for the position." "You just had your interview," Robert said with a grin. "You're hired. Start Monday?" "Start Monday," Sarah agreed, laughing. If you've been enjoying this story and want to hear more heartwarming tales like this, please subscribe to our channel. We share stories of kindness, redemption, and hope every week. As Sarah walked away to put Robert's order in, she felt lighter than she had in months. The pain in her leg was barely noticeable. The fear that had been her constant companion since the accident had faded to a distant whisper. She had a new job, a new future, and something else to a friend. An unexpected friend who'd seen her at her lowest and helped lift her back up. Rosie caught her eye from behind the counter and winked. "Good news?" "The best news," Sarah said, grinning so wide her face hurt. The breakfast rush came and went. Sarah moved through it with an ease she hadn't felt in a long time, chatting with regulars, refilling coffee, delivering plates of eggs and pancakes. When Robert left, he stopped at the counter to say goodbye to Rosie and gave Sarah a small wave. "See you Monday, Sarah." "See you Monday." Robert. The following Monday morning, Sarah stood in front of the Mitchell Technologies building wearing her best interview suit, which she'd bought years ago for a job she didn't get. Her heart was racing, but it was excitement now, not fear. She walked through the glass doors without limping, her legs strong and steady beneath her. Robert met her in the lobby personally, which surprised her. "I usually have Patricia handle new employee orientation," he said, "but I wanted to do this myself." "Ready for the tour?" Mitchell Technologies was impressive. The office spaces were modern and bright, with large windows and comfortable furniture. Robert had designed the space to feel welcoming rather than corporate, he explained. There was a full kitchen with free coffee and snacks, a small gym, and something Robert called quiet rooms where employees could go when they needed a moment of peace during a stressful day. The wellness program you'll be running is about more than just health insurance. Robert explained as they walked. It's about creating a culture where people feel supported, where they're not afraid to ask for help when they need it, where showing up means more than just being physically present, it means being mentally and emotionally okay too. Sarah understood what he wasn't saying. He'd learned something from their experience together, just as she had. He wanted to build a workplace where no one fell through the cracks, the way she nearly had. Her office was small but had a window. There was a new desk, a computer, and a nameplate that read, Sarah Brennan, Employee Wellness Coordinator. Sarah ran her fingers over the engraved letters and felt tears threaten again. She'd cried more in the past 3 months than she had in years, but these tears were different from the ones she'd shed on her apartment floor. These were tears of gratitude, of hope, of new beginnings. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of it. Robert stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. You know what I learned from you, Sarah? I learned that everyone has a story. Everyone who crosses our path is dealing with something we can't see. That young guy who cuts me off in traffic. Maybe he's racing to the hospital. The cashier who's moving slowly. Maybe she's in pain. I spent my whole life thinking I was a good man because I built a successful company and treated my employees fairly. But I wasn't really seeing people. Not the way I should have been. You're seeing them now, Sarah said. That counts for something. Over the following months, Sarah threw herself into her new role. She developed programs to help employees manage stress, created partnerships with local therapists and counselors, organized workshops on everything from financial planning to meditation. She met with employees one-on-one, listening to their struggles and concerns with the same patience and empathy that Robert and Dr. Chun had shown her. She understood what it meant to be struggling in silence, and she made sure no one at Mitchell Technologies had to do that anymore. Robert watched her work with something close to awe. She was exactly as good at the job as he'd known she would be. More than that, she'd brought something intangible to the company, a warmth, a sense of genuine care that spread through the office like sunlight. Employee satisfaction scores went up. People smiled more. The culture shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. One afternoon, about 4 months after Sarah started, Robert stopped by her office. Got a minute? Always, Sarah said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. It was a nice reversal from that day in her apartment when he'd come to apologize. I wanted you to know that the wellness program has exceeded every expectation I had, Robert said. You're making a real difference here, Sarah. People feel cared for. They feel seen. That's because of you. It's because you created space for this program to exist, Sarah countered. Not every CEO would do that. Well, I had a good teacher, Robert said with a slight smile. You taught me that kindness matters more than punctuality, that everyone deserves a second chance, that the right thing to do is usually the hard thing, and you do it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Robert said, My daughter Melissa is coming to visit next week. She wants to meet you. I've told her all about you, about what happened, about the work you're doing now. She said I should have you over for dinner. I'd like that, Sarah said warmly. As Robert left, Sarah turned to look out her window at the city below. Somewhere out there was the old brick apartment building where she'd sat on the floor and cried, certain her life was over. Somewhere out there was the diner where she'd been publicly humiliated and lost her job. And here she was now, in an office with her name on the door, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who respected her. The journey from there to here had been painful and difficult, but it had also been worth it. She thought about the woman she'd been before the accident, so focused on independence that she'd forgotten how to accept help, so determined to handle everything alone that she'd nearly broken under the weight. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, not because she could do everything herself, but because she'd learned she didn't have to. If you enjoyed this story of second chances and unexpected kindness, please remember to like this video. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with forgiveness and redemption. And subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories every week. Thank you so much for joining us on Sarah and Robert's journey. May we all remember to look a little closer, judge a little less quickly, and extend grace to the people we meet along the way. Sometimes the person who seems to be failing is actually fighting the hardest battle. See you in the next story.